I'm so excited today on the show. The tables will be turned and I will be getting questioned. So my friend Laura will be here and drilling me on all the questions about the real estate market and the trends for 2025. This is Jessica Duncan's Just My Opinion, and I'm Jessica. There's no handbook to owning a home. That's why I go beyond the transaction to share my insights for adulting made simple. All right, so today we have a little bit of different style of show prepared for you. I have my friend Laura Griffin here. Welcome, Laura, to the show.
Thanks for having me.
She is the executive director with the Escambia County Medical Society. But today we're doing something a little different. She is going to question me. So we were asking, hey, what do you want to hear us talk about? And she had some great ideas. So we are letting her take over the interview floor today and ask me all the questions that have been burning desire for her to get answered. So welcome to the show. We're so glad you're here. You want to start by telling us a little bit about your background and what you do?
Yeah, so I'm currently, like you said, executive director of the Escambia County Medical Society, which is kind of like a chamber of commerce networking group for physicians. So it's doctors from Escambia, Santa Rosa County, and that's what I do now. We host events, networking for them, things like that. And prior to that, I owned a UPS store for several years, and I worked for a UPS store regional office for about 20 years.
Okay.
Also.
So entrepreneur, gone into sort of the business culture, nonprofit
world, yeah.
And then you're very involved too here locally with the nonprofit world and giving back to our community as we're at an event together last night giving back to our community.
Yes.
So thank you for that. And thank you for being involved in our community and a good steward of our community.
Thank you.
So you want to start by taking it away with your first question.
Yeah.
What do you got for me?
What are trends in real estate that you're noticing this year? And what do you think, where do you think the market is going in the next 5-10 years?
Trends as far as what we're seeing in the houses, or trends in how things are selling, or give me a little bit more specific?
I think trends in where people are moving to, where they're leaving, and how things are selling.
Okay, so trends as far as they are definitely moving here. Absolutely moving to Pensacola. Obviously, all of Florida has been a big trend the past 5 years of people moving to Florida. I also think our area has been discovered, the best way I can explain it. Growing up here and being from here, we were this small little town that no one really ever heard of. People came here through the military, and people who moved here either were stationed here at one time or had a family member here. You just didn't get people randomly going, I'm going to move to Pensacola, Florida. There was a reason. They had been here, their family had been here, and a lot of times it was because of the military and because they were stationed here at one of our many bases we have around the area. But that's changed. You can't find a top 10 best places to retire, most affordable beach town, any list like that anywhere that we're not on. Movies talk about us now. So we just get a lot of mentions nationally. And so a lot of people have discovered us. So this little bitty sleepy town that we used to be, we are no longer. And I don't think we will ever go back to that. I think we will just continue to grow. My hope is that we do it strategically, which I think we've had a pretty good plan here and really been focused on that. A lot to do with the leadership of Quint Studer. Thankfully, he's gotten pretty involved in our community. But I think, and even with the mayor downtown now and his strategic plan, I love his outlook on it. I love the way he's not being so defined by a plan. It's defined by the goals, and then we adjust according to achieving those goals. So I think we're just going to continue to grow and continue to have more and more people move here. As far as areas, if you want to talk about where people are moving in areas, because that's also sort of a trend here. The areas that I see growing more and more is the outskirts, what used to be the rural areas. They are just continuing to grow.
I live in Beulah. Everybody's moving to Beulah.
Yes, yes. Beulah is not what it used to be. I mean, I used to ride horses down 9 Mile Road.
Yeah.
There's no way you would ride a horse down 9 Mile Road. And I'm talking about, I used to ride where the Publix is on 9 Mile Road, not Beulah, but like Pine Forest and 9 Mile.
Milestone area.
Yeah, I used to ride all through there, and you wouldn't dare get on 9 Mile Road 4 lanes each way with a horse right now.
Yeah. That's where my UPS store was, and we purchased it when we did in 2016 because we knew that area was growing, and we were like, we need to get in now.
Yeah. So here's the interesting thing, though, of why that area is growing so much. And this is another area that I see continuing to grow, but also if you look to the east, Milton area, as soon as you go over the bridge, I think that's going to continue to grow. And the reason why is we're surrounded by water on 3 sides, right? So Pensacola is got all this waterfront property, which is one reason why people love it here. But we have built on most usable land in the south end of the county. Every place we could build, we build, right? So we kept pushing further north and further north because we had to find buildable land. So that's why in Beulah, all of a sudden you had all of these subdivisions pop up right and left. It's because there wasn't any more land left in Pensacola south, so they had to go up there. Now we've hit a point where we've continued to go so far north that it's 45 minutes to an hour to get into town, and people don't want to drive that far. So now what I'm seeing is it's starting to go to the east. And I said that about 4 or 5 years ago. I said, oh, Avalon, great area to invest. That is going to be developing like crazy over the next 10 to 15 years. And I think that's proving true. I think people don't want to go that far north, so they're going to go a little east.
I love it. I love living in Beulah. I think it's a great area.
What do you like about it?
I don't live in a subdivision. We live just on a regular street, no HOA. I've got 2 acres. We live next door to my in-laws. They've got 5 acres. I just like the space. I like being able to have a big yard to get my big dog outside and run around. I like the neighbors, just the sense of community. And your brand
new grocery store, the best one in town.
The most beautiful Publix ever. It had with the upstairs seating area. It's elite. Publix is great. I'm excited for more restaurants to come out there, but just the sense of community out there, it still feels like a small area.
It does. I used to live out there as well, one road over from that Publix, so I absolutely loved it out there. I've lived in just about every part of town, and I can tell you what I like about each part of town, the pros and cons of each one and traffic patterns, but it's definitely a highly demanded area, and some people out there haven't wanted the growth. Right?
There's a lot of people do not want their growth. And I get that. You know, there are families who have lived out there for generations and their way of life is changing. But for right now, I still think it still has that small community feel that I really like.
You know, I think our whole area does, really our whole town. It's funny because we've grown into this bigger city that we have all these opportunities and things to do and activities, and we have everything that a big city has to offer, but we still have that small town feel. I can't go anywhere without running into 3 or 4 people that I know. It's still that real close-knit community.
Cool.
So hopefully, did I answer that question okay? Any more?
Yeah, no, that's great. But let's segue into the other trend you mentioned, like in the actual build of homes. Like what is it? Is there any design trends or like things like energy efficiency, architecture that you're seeing different?
So energy efficiency hasn't been a huge trend that we're seeing in new construction. Of course, the solar panels came out and a lot of people installed them on their houses. There's a lot of issues with that. As a real estate agent, we have to deal with all the time. Please call me before you do that. But there's been, not major energy efficient changes done to new construction at all. The biggest thing that we're seeing with new construction, and I would say over probably the past 10 plus years, is smaller and smaller land. That is very common. The lot sizes are just getting smaller. The more in town you are, the more expensive land cost is. And so the builders are trying to keep the cost of homes down. So because of that, they keep making those yards smaller and smaller and smaller, where, used to a subdivision was built and it was very common to be on at least 1/4 of an acre or larger. That's not as common anymore. It's a lot harder to find those size yards. So definitely seeing that. The other trends that I would say we're seeing across new construction is the houses have gotten a little bigger. So prior to COVID, we were going smaller, smaller, smaller. The needs, the wants, the desires were smaller, smaller, smaller. And then COVID hit and everyone started spending a lot more time at home. And now we're going back to the bigger and bigger houses. So that's definitely been a trend where people are wanting more space and they're utilizing their home in different ways than they have before. Obviously, there's a lot more people working at home. I know there's a lot of companies calling them back into the office, but not all have. And so there's still a lot of need for that in-home office space within their house.
What about people looking for multi-generational homes? Like right now, my mom lives with my brother, and my siblings and I are in a constant fight of where we want her to live. We all want her to live with us, and we all have the space for her. Are you seeing people looking for homes that have like that mother-in-law suite?
Yes, we do see some of that, but what we also see is the need for it in the future. So we don't have a lot of houses here that offer multi-generation families living in. I just got one under contract that's hopefully closing soon that had a perfect design for that. But there's not a lot of those houses out there, and there's definitely a need that I continue to see growing. It's not as common in the United States as it is overseas, where multiple generations did live together. But now what we're seeing, especially with the cost of housing, and as our parents get older, or even children start to grow up and have their own families, we're seeing multiple generations live in one house. That's never been a trend in the United States as much as it is now, and will continue to be, I think, over the next 20 years.
What about people looking to downsize? Are there anything new going on with that? Like older people wanting to downsize to something smaller?
So we have always had that. I call it right sizing, whether you want to downsize, upsize. Generally, people move because their house doesn't fit their needs anymore. So whether that is it's too big or it's too small, they're moving because it doesn't fit their needs. So that will always be a trend. We definitely see that. We also see the older generation wanting to downsize out of their 4,400 square foot home and either move in with a family member or even move into a nice assisted living facility or something like that. So that's definitely a trend, and I think that will continue as well. But I think that's been a trend for a while. I think we have become more acceptant of moving someplace else. So when I think back to like my grandfather's generation, he thought if you went somewhere to live, you went there to die. You would never move to an assisted living or a retirement community because if you did, you were going to die. That was just his thought process. Now they're really nice. They're like little apartments. They have all these activities. So I think it's made people more accepting of that and willing to do it because, hey, I get someone to cook for me and I don't even have to do my own laundry. Sounds like you're living in a hotel to me. It sounds pretty good. So I think they're a lot more accepting and we're seeing that more.
I wish they had those for 45-year-olds too, instead of just 75-year-olds. So I could live somewhere where somebody does my laundry.
Well, they have it. You just have to hire them, right?
Oh.
Yeah, hire a chef, they're not as affordable, but I say that. Some of those places are really expensive. They're really nice, though.
They really are.
All right, so what else you got for me?
Let's see. When I bought my house, there was a rush to make my offer and get to closing because of interest rates changing. And there's a lot of question right now about interest rates and what the Fed is going to do. How can buyers strategize and plan for those kind of fluctuations that nobody has any control over?
Well, I think we're in a weird situation right now where people think, oh, rates are going to drop. They're so high. They're actually not. And I did a whole podcast actually on rates. So definitely go back and listen to it if you want to know more about that. But the average rate over the last 100 years is 6 to 8%, with the actual average being about 7.25, 7.35, somewhere in there. So we are looking at 6 to 8% has been the average over 100 years. Now we had that one span of about eight years that we had it below 4%. It's never been there in the last 100 years besides those 8 years. So the chances of us ever seeing that again in my lifetime are slim to none. Could it happen? It could. Am I going to sit around and wait on it? Probably not, because it may never happen. And really, we're at an affordable interest rate. When I bought my first house, rates were 9%. I still bought a house. The 80s, rates were 18%. People still bought houses. It still made sense. So people have got to get over that, oh, it's 6.5%. That's not a bad rate. And actually, when rates are above about 6%, you can still earn money on your money. So there's some benefits to it as well. I mean, when you're just looking from the lending side, no, but on your savings side and being able to actually earn money on your money, there's some benefits. But the biggest thing I would say, people get a little shocked on the rates when I try and point out to them, what are you paying on your car? So if you're paying 8 or 9% on your car, why are you freaking out over 6.5 or 7 on something that's going to earn money versus something that's losing value daily, like a car? Or look at the credit cards you have. What interest rate are you paying on those? Most of them are 18 to 24%. I wish people would get as frustrated about paying that and pay it off versus worrying about what the current interest rate is to buy a house. But let's say they do go down. Maybe I'm completely wrong and they go down next month. Whenever you buy a house, the bank is locked in at that rate for 30 years if it's a 30-year fixed mortgage, but you can always refinance. So if they do drop, refinance.
So what I'm hearing is I should be very happy with my 3.5.
Yes, you should be very happy because you will probably never get that in your lifetime again.
Hashtag blessed.
Yes, absolutely.
I'm thinking back to when we were going through our house purchasing process. I was clueless. I didn't really know what to expect. What are like the top handful of things for new home buyers that they may, in your experience, that they may not think of?
Well, I actually did an episode about mistakes they make, and I think that's a good place for someone to start. But I think they really should, first of all, find a really good agent and listen to them. They do this all the time. If they're a good, experienced agent, they should be advising you through this. And so you want to really dig in and find out how much activity they do and how up to date they are on what's going on, because stuff changes in our industry daily. It is so fast. What was happening a month ago is not happening now. And so the way I advise my clients on certain situations is very different than it was a month ago. So I would say that's the number one thing, is find a good agent and listen to them.
I was shocked at just the amount of information that I had to get together.
Oh, yes.
Just the vast amount of financial information was wild to me. And kind of with that, about, with getting a good agent, what's your opinion on using a buyer finding a property that they like and then using the seller's agent?
Well, I mean, it just depends on the situation. So in that situation, you would never have an agent yourself. So you would only be calling the listing agent. When you first call them, you have to understand they represent the seller, not you. And so when they are representing both sides, there's less information. They can't hide anything from you, right? They can't tell you, no, this doesn't flood, and they know it's flooded 3 times. They can't do anything like that. But they can't advise you the same way as if they were just working with you. There is some limitations there. But I'm also not going to say that the perfect house that, I may have a buyer that I have the listing as well, and the perfect house is my listing. And I represent both sides sometimes. That happens. But I wouldn't necessarily just go at it going, I'm not going to work with an agent. I'm only going to try and work with the listing side. A lot of people think that they will save money there, and that's not always true. So why not have your representation?
I think that's really important.
Mm-hmm.
What about second homes, investment properties? Are you seeing more or less people getting into investment properties recently?
So I definitely see investment properties have been bought a lot more in the past couple years. So during COVID, it became very hard to buy investment properties because everything was in multiple offers. And when you're trying to achieve a return on investment property and it's submit your highest and best and there's 10 offers, it became very hard to find properties that made sense. So investments really slowed down for a couple years. Now they've started to pick back up. And when I say that, I'm thinking of more in-town investments. The beach is a little different. It's totally on its own little trends, I guess you could say. But it was harder to find stuff that made sense. For the last couple of years, we have been able to find stuff that really makes sense for our investors and me as an investor. I will say that what we're buying is very different because of the interest rates have gone up. So gone up from where they were a couple years ago, as well as insurance costs has gone up so much. And then the lagging effect that it takes a little bit of time for rents to catch up with those increased cost. Mm-hmm. There's a 2 to 3 year lag effect for that to happen. And so I do think that it's been harder to buy a property and turn around and rent it out right away and make it cash flow. The ones that have made sense were properties that were cash only, or because they were uninsurable or unfinanceable, go in, bring them up to par, and then rent them out. That's where I've been finding the last couple of years that most of my investors are achieving the return on investment. And that's where I've personally been investing the last couple of years.
I see on the news quite often recently in especially larger cities where outside investors are coming in and purchasing up a bunch of properties. Are we seeing that here? If so, is it affecting our inventory for the locals?
I hear about that on the news, but I have to say I haven't really experienced it. And I'm not going to say it's not happening, but news isn't always correct. The real estate industry went through some major changes in 2024, and 90% of the stuff I saw on the news was completely inaccurate. And so I'm not going to say they're 100% inaccurate in this, but I will say I'm not seeing it here. I hear that in big cities that's happening. locally, if anything that we have seen outside companies buying land here, it's for apartment complexes. And we had a shortage of them. We needed them. So yes, we're seeing them pop up all over the place, but we also needed them. We did not have a lot of rentals here. We have always had a shortage of rentals, especially in the apartments. We haven't built a lot of apartments here in a long time. So I have seen that. And they're buying land to build apartments. But as far as a lot of the news is talking about these companies or groups coming in and buying up all the houses to rent them out and control the rents and things like that, I haven't really seen that a lot here.
Interesting. That's good. Good to hear. We can keep us locals can keep our homes.
Yes.
What about on like the commercial side? Anything you're seeing interesting? How's like the commercial inventory?
So commercial was really slow last year. Well, the whole industry slowed down dramatically in 2024. The closer we got to election, the even slower it got, which is common. So anytime you have a presidential election, you tend to see a slowdown in real estate. Commercial even more than residential though. But this year was the biggest halt I've ever experienced in real estate because of an election. It was pretty much a stop, a complete stop. Yeah. And at commercial, that greatly affected it. And a lot of that's because your business owners are wanting to know who's going to be our president, how is that going to affect my income, and that way I can decide how I want to invest. And so we're in this limbo, right? And so they're scared to make a decision. The easiest way I can explain it is that time in your relationship where it's like, I know they're going to propose pretty soon. We probably don't want to buy a house, but yet I don't want to act like I don't want to buy a house because, I want to see where this is going. That limbo, you just don't know what to do. That's sort of where we were last year, especially in commercial. Now it's starting to pick up a little bit. Commercial is a little slower. We've seen a lot of businesses go out of business, unfortunately, in the past couple months. And we've had some pretty big chains that have went out of business that have locations here. Some were told 5 days before Christmas, which is awful. So, I think that is going to impact commercial a little bit, but I think it is definitely turning around commercial, and we are starting to see that increase. It's just going to be a slower increase than residential turnaround was.
I want to remodel my kitchen so badly, and I want new floors so badly. Mm-hmm. And my husband keeps telling me, we're not going to live here forever. Let's just wait and let the next people do it.
But then you don't get to enjoy it.
That's what I'm saying. So what is your opinion on that?
I think it depends. How long do you plan to stay in the home?
5 to 10 more years.
Oh, then remodel that darn kitchen. Absolutely. I mean, you're going to be there 5 to 10 more years. Enjoy it. So kitchens and bathrooms do affect the value greatly, but they're also the most expensive rooms to remodel. So if you were looking to sell your house in 6 months, you may not quite get that recap if you did it really nice. You could, it just depends. I'd have to look at the neighborhood, look at the values, run the comps. But if you're going to be there 5 to 10 years, you're probably going to be able to recoup that value over time as your values increase. So I would definitely say do the kitchen.
So I will be showing this episode to Dan.
Yes, Dan, let her redo the kitchen. Let her enjoy it.
It's not even a big kitchen. It won't even be that hard.
It's always more. Listen to the podcast on remodeling because there are some tips there, some mistakes you can make. We'll try and help you avoid them.
Oh, yeah, for sure. What is your take on our area's market for the rest of 2025?
So I told you last year was a really slow year. It slowed down dramatically. Now we're starting to see the increase. Literally, as soon as the election was over, our phones started ringing off the hook. It was just everyone had that stability of, okay, we know. Now we know, right? So we're out of this limbo phase. And then the New Year's hit and it's picked up even more. Now we're really starting to see the transactions increase. So we're starting to see the days on the market go down. That is all historical data. So it's really just real time happening in change. So it's like we feel the change, but it doesn't quite show full effect in the numbers. But I think it will by the end of first quarter. I think as we continue into the year, though, bearing nothing major happening that I can't foresee, like a pandemic or something. Now I'm always hesitant when I give predictions because I never could have predicted a pandemic, first of all. And second of all, that a pandemic would skyrocket real estate. Never would have thought that. Would have thought it would have done something different. But so I think it's going to continue if we stay at the same rate going through the year. I would not be surprised if over the summer we are in multiple offers again. Things are going to be pretty pretty hot. And I think the reason why is we have a lot of pent-up demand. So if you think of our locals, go back again the last 5 years, no one moved. They had a low interest rate and they weren't competing against all these people moving from out of state that were paying way over appraisal value, cash. They didn't care what it was. They just wanted to get to Florida, get to a free state and live here, right? So we had people moving from all over the US here, and locals were like, I can't compete with that. And I'm not giving up my low interest rate. So no one moved. And then as that buying spree happened, as it started to slow down, the rates went up. So then again, our locals didn't move. So a lot of our local people, their house has not fit their needs for the past 5 years, but they haven't moved for interest rate reasons or competitive reasons about the market. So now they're starting to, and I think we will continue to see that over the rest of 2025. If we do have multiple offers this summer, though, I don't think it's going to be like COVID. I don't think, you're going to have 15 offers on every house. So don't let that intimidate you. But I do think we could see, if the house is priced right, we could see 1 to 3 offers on every house. And so that's priced right and ready to go. Of course, not everything in the market. But so if you do see something you like, I think it's the time to move on it. Wow, this has been fun. So totally different having the tables turned on me and the questions being asked of me, but I enjoyed it. You didn't stump me too much, but I loved your questions and I loved your intrigue into the market, especially someone who's not necessarily in real estate. So I love that you were interested enough, and I'm so glad you reached out with the questions so that we can bring you on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. It was really fun and I learned a lot.
All right, it's time for my home hack. So each week we do a home hack. It's just a tip, a product, a thing that makes home ownership easier, more enjoyable, more pleasurable, just something about the home that I wanted to share with you. So this week I'm going to share my favorite sponges. I know it sounds crazy, but sponges. So I can't stand a nasty, stinky sponge. And while they clean very well on my dishes, I don't like them after about a day and a half, because to me they stink and I don't want to smell them. But I discovered these wonderful sponges from Williams-Sonoma. They are made of coconut husk and they don't stink. Like I can use them for a week without them smelling. Then I just throw them in the dishwasher and use them again. And they last for almost a month. They are incredible. They're not that expensive. So definitely check out the coconut husk sponges from Williams-Sonoma. I'm in love with them. This has been Just My Opinion. I hope you enjoyed the show. Please subscribe so you never miss an episode. If you have a question for us, make sure you send me a DM. We may just ask you to be on the show like we did Laura today. So send us any questions. We'd love to answer them. You can shoot me a DM, Facebook, Instagram, email, wherever you would like. Thank you again for being here. See you again soon for Adulting Made Simple. But remember, it's just my opinion.